The next morning, back in Wayhaven. It's difficult to decide between weirdos or creepy shadow people as I'm typing up my report the next morning. At least I didn't fire my gun. That would have added a whole hour's worth of paperwork to fill in on top of what I already have. The sooner I get this paperwork over with, the sooner it will be done and not on my ever-growing to-do list. I let out a heavy sigh at the thought. I glance up for a moment, staring out of my office's glass partition to the station beyond, before settling down further into my chair and getting to work. That is, until footsteps sound from the doorway. I look up to see Douglas fidgeting uneasily. "Is there something you need, Douglas?" I ask, watching as he shifts from foot to foot. "It's just—" He clears his throat, flicking his head to the side so his bangs reveal his eyes a little bit more. Big, puppy dog eyes, which I imagine often get him out of a lot of trouble. "You took my phone yesterday. I wondered if I could have it back now. I promise I won't do it again." Oh, crap. I had completely forgotten. My gaze darts to my jacket hanging on the coat rack next to him, where his phone is still hidden in the inner pocket. "Oh, I'm so sorry, kid," I say, pushing myself out of my seat and striding towards my jacket. "Yesterday was a bit hectic. I didn't mean to forget it." "It's all right, Detective." He offers a genuine smile, and I'm thankful for his understanding. I grab the phone from the pocket of my coat and throw it towards him. "Here you go." He fumbles to catch it, but manages in the end. "Thanks." And with cheery gratitude, he heads back to his desk. Suddenly, a welcome visitor peers around my doorway. "You okay, Celeste?" Tina asks, worry in her words. She moves further into the room and shuts the door to my office. I raise a brow at her concern. "Why wouldn't I be?" "Barry told me you went to the Ferris warehouse on a hunch. Did it pay off?" She glances over me. I'm sitting slightly hunched, my body still aching from the confrontation last night. "And you're not exactly looking so good." "Yeah, the victim had some blurred photos of the warehouse," I reply. "So I went to check it out. It ended up being a popular place last night, apparently." She balances herself on the edge of my desk beside me. "Who were they? Did you find anything?" "Well, I managed to collect this off one of the strangers," I say, pulling the blood sample I collected from the top drawer of my desk. Her brows arch in surprise. "How did you manage to get that? I can't believe they were just willing to let you take it." I purse my lips for a moment. "It wasn't willingly, no. One of them took a pretty bad hit in their altercation. They probably deserved it." I placed the sample down beside her. "Can you take the sample down to Verda for me?" "Sure thing. I gotta get going on my patrol soon anyway." Her smile turns mischievous. "I'm pretty sure my route goes past Haley's Bakery." She leaves with a spring in her step. I try to get back to work, my stomach grumbling at the mention of pastries. Later that day. The rest of the morning passes slowly. The patrol finds nothing unusual, and our reliable scouts around town, the elderly who just love to curtain twitch whenever they get the chance, also haven't seen anything strange, nor any new visitors to Wayhaven. I slap down the phone I had been speaking to Tina on and run my hands over my face. Picking up the tea I made myself a few minutes before, not having had a chance all morning, I gulp back a mouthful. Then I almost spit it back out over my desk, gagging on the cold slop that fills my mouth. It takes all my strength to swallow it down, my face pinching together to force it past my tongue. "What is this?" I yell, holding up the offending drink towards Douglas through the glass partition. He spins on his chair to face me through the window, glances at the drink, then shrugs. "The kettle's broken." "And no one thought to tell me?" He purses his lips. "I just did." I try to grumble through my anger and push myself out of my chair to head to the small kitchen area. The red light on the kettle blinks at me like a heartbeat, a weak one. I lean down towards it, peering at the white plastic shell of the machine. After unplugging the machine, I pull off the bottom of the casing and have a look inside. There certainly are a lot of wires. Still, I give a shrug and start getting to work. A few minutes later, I give a proud smile, plugging the machine back in and listening to the gentle whir it makes. I press the button, watch it boil, and then jump back a foot when a shower of sparks erupts from the back of the machine. "Well, at least you tried your best," someone says from behind me with a chuckle. The new voice makes me whirl around, and my brows arch in surprise to see the woman standing before me. "Mum?" She smiles at me, placing a gentle hand on my arm in greeting. It's more than a bit of shock to find her standing before me. She's usually away due to her work, a fact that hadn't changed even when I was a child. I'm glad you're here, I say with a smile, though I'm surprised, too. She gives an apologetic nod. I'm sorry it hasn't been sooner. We've both been pretty busy, I reply, leading her towards my office. As we head inside, she glances over to the whiteboard I had set to one side, with notes and photos of the murder placed on it. So I can see. She takes the seat on the other side of the desk, and I move to sit in my own chair. Why are you here? I finally ask, leaning back in my chair a little to examine her. She hasn't changed much. She's always had a mature, commanding presence. She looks younger than she is, although I do notice a few new wrinkles around her forehead, accentuated by the uncertain frown she now pulls. She looks out of place against the clutter of my office in her pristine gray suit, bright white shirt, and stiff, formal posture. The title of Agent Rebecca DeWolfe growing a bit dull, I say. She shakes her head, folding her elegant hands into her lap. No, work is going fine. A vague response, but that's not unusual. Every time I've attempted to find out more about her job, I'm always met with the same mysterious replies before the conversation quickly changes. The most I know is that she works for some shadowy government agency. She tells me, in fact, that's partly why I'm here. Oh? The case you're working on. Her gaze shifts over the whiteboard once again. It's bigger than you think. A murder is pretty big on its own, I say, leaning forwards and inspecting her. How can it be bigger? This is your first murder case. There's more involved in these things than you may think, she replies, her professional expression returning. She clears her throat, her brows nodding in a slight frown, as though stumbling for a word. The man you're looking for has killed before, in many places. I swallow hard and try not to show my disturbance at this news. And now he's picked Wayhaven as his killing ground. We've been tracking him for months. She stands from her chair and begins pacing. But I don't believe he will be leaving Wayhaven for some time, so now is our last chance to catch him. Why won't he be leaving? I slump back in my chair, a little disheartened by all this information. She twists around to face me, her lips set into a tight line. I sigh in sudden understanding. It's classified. She nods. I'm afraid so, but there is something I can offer you. I perk up at this. It must be serious if I'm being offered resources by whomever she works for. It's something the mayor is keen for you to utilize. My excitement deflates a little. I swallow down my annoyance of the mayor's lack of faith in my ability and attempt to smile. Well, any help is always appreciated. I'm glad to hear it. You won't regret it. Trust me. She's obviously pleased, but my smile falters a little. Rebecca closes the gap to my desk, placing a hand on mine. I know you can solve this. Otherwise, the agency wouldn't have allowed me to let you lead such a big case. They'd be asking me to take over instead. I smile up at her, grateful for the encouraging words, even if I'm not sure I wholly believe them. She pats my hand and moves away, letting out a small sigh. So, what is it you're offering? I ask. My unit. I arch a brow. Pardon? My unit, the team of agents I command. She gives a half smile at my obvious surprise. I didn't even know you had a team. I thought you ran some department or... I do, she quickly interrupts. Once again, she stops the conversation about her work before it even begins. I watch as she moves to the doorway, gesturing towards the front doors of the station. I try to peer around her to see who she's calling, but I can't see anything until 4 people march into the room after my mother. 2 men, 2 women. It's hard to keep my jaw from dropping. The group of them look as though they strode straight off a catwalk into my office. I eventually stumble onto my feet and move around my desk. With 6 of us now crammed into my office, it's beginning to feel a little crowded. However, when I meet the eye of one of the group and he offers a smile, I relax a little. Detective Celeste DeWolfe, I'd like you to meet my team. Unit Bravo. None of them says anything in response, and silence begins to descend on the room like an uncomfortable blanket. I take a step closer towards the group and hold out a hand. It's nice to meet you all. I look forward to working with you. Most of them stare down at my extended hand as though it might be contagious, but the one who offered the smile moments before steps forward. It's nice to make your acquaintance, Detective DeWolfe. There's no distinguishable accent. None at all. He takes my hand and shakes it. My name is Nathaniel Sewell, but I prefer Nate. Once again he gives a bright, warm smile, making his dark brown eyes sparkle. He's tall, incredibly so, having had to duck through the doorway to enter. At least 6'4", at a guess. He withdraws his hand, shoving it into the pocket of his jeans. The earthy tones he wears complement his tawny-colored skin. His dark brown hair is styled up, as casual as his whole being seems to portray, from the leather jacket, open shirt, t-shirt, and jeans, to the way he leans back on his heels slightly as he stands. His lips are still curled into a smile when my gaze has finished passing over him, as though he knew I was inspecting him and was happy to allow it. Nate steps back into the lineup of his group, standing beside a man a few inches shorter than he is. The man stares at me for a short moment, his posture stiff and his expression stern. Thankfully, one of the others approaches me before I have to deal with that rather imposing stranger. I'm Farah, the approaching woman says, a more American accent to her tone. Farah Hoville. She's quite obviously the youngest of the group, dressed in skinny jeans, a long t-shirt half covered by a heavy cotton scarf, a waistcoat, and large silver hoops almost lost in her shoulder-length, black coiled hair. Her rich, dark brown skin almost seems to gleam gold in the sunlight, her bold yet feminine features contrasting with the soft smile she throws me. I reach out to take her hand. She shakes it for a moment before clasping it tighter and sauntering a step closer. She's much shorter than Nate, 5'4" at most, but her entire being is rather overwhelming as she stands so close. A true delight to meet you, Detective, she coos, bringing my fingers up to her shapely lips. I stare at her with a confused frown. It's, nice to meet you too. I continue to shake her hand as she pulls it closer, then remove it from her grasp, unsure what that weird greeting was supposed to be. She stares at me for a moment, cocking her head to one side before giving a light laugh. She then moves back to join her group. I notice Nate shake his head in an exasperated manner at Farah, but the woman only gives a bright grin in return. I shake away the previous introduction, turning to the dark-haired stranger on my right. I am still attempting not to look at the stern man standing beside Nate, who continues to examine me with a narrowed gaze. And you are? I ask, holding out a hand in greeting once again. Finding all of this unnecessary, she replies curtly, a gentle, lilting accent to her statement that I can't quite recognize. Okay then, I say, pulling my hand back and giving a confused frown. Not a woman of many words, I take it. That's putting it lightly, Farah mutters. My mother lets out a heavy sigh and steps forward. This is Specialist Agent Morgan, she introduces her. Morgan stands slightly hunched, though she still has to be about 5'7". Waves of layered dark brown hair hang around her long face, her straight nose and narrow eyes giving her a rather wolfish appearance. Her deep tan skin is painted with light freckles that cover her nose and cheeks, continuing down her neck until they are hidden by a long-sleeved, tight-fitting t-shirt and heavy black jeans. Cords of leather sit around her neck and are tied around her wrists. A crystal dangles on one of the cords, but I barely get a chance to see it before she notices where my gaze has fallen and slips it inside her shirt. I fold my arms across my chest. Charmed. You shouldn't be, she replies, her voice monotone. Now she's just trying to bait me, a dangerous glint flashing in her stormy gray eyes, shadowed by thick, manicured brows. I glare at her, not wanting to act unprofessional, but seriously debating it. Save it, Morgan, a voice commands, and I stiffen in eerie recognition. I turn to the imposing, stern-looking man and frown in confusion. My mother steps forward, a proud smile on her face, yet I continue to stare, his voice still echoing in my mind. It was the same one from outside of the warehouse last night. I'm sure of it. Ah, Celeste, let me introduce you to the team leader, Commanding Agent Adam Dumortin. Our narrowed stares hold before my mother steps closer once more and leans over to whisper, Is something wrong? I shake my head and blink out of my silence. No, it's nothing. Sorry. It's ridiculous to think it was him. Must just be my imagination. It was a pretty intense night. Easy to get confused. Plus, I did pepper spray whoever it was last night. Looking over the group, no one seems to be covered in red rashes or inflammation. Then, for the last time, I offer out my hand in introduction. Adam stares down at it as though the gesture is completely foreign, but does eventually take it. I look forward to working with you, he says, every word spoken in a distinct British accent, and each one also sounding like a lie. Likewise, I reply, pulling my hand back and pressing it against my thigh to stop the aching in my fingers from his surprisingly firm grasp. He turns his gaze quickly away, but I let mine linger for a moment. He's the second tallest of the group, easily 6'1", with broad shoulders and an athletic build obvious beneath his gray t-shirt and dark combat trousers. His pale, creamy skin barely has a tan or flush to it at all, and his dark blonde hair is only just visible, cut so close to his head. Everything about him screams soldier, including his stiff, upright posture and emotionless face. Still, I can't deny his Roman nose and square features make him remarkably handsome. I flinch slightly as his icy green gaze flicks back to meet mine, and I'm forced to look away. Well, now that introductions have been made, I hope you'll all work together to find the murderer, my mother says, her gaze shifting pointedly over her team. Unit Bravo were only assigned this case a couple of weeks ago themselves, so they'll be as fresh as you. But I'm proud of their accomplishments so far, and have no doubt they will aid you to their highest abilities. Morgan scoffs from where she's balanced herself against the side table in the furthest corner. My mother ignores her, striding past the group towards me. I'm giving you my team to help, so use them as best you can. They're experienced at this kind of work. She pulls me into a quick goodbye hug, pressing a kiss on my cheek. It's a more affectionate and motherly goodbye than usual, but I return her hug. Well, I'll see you soon, Celeste. My mother heads towards the door, pulling her long jacket about herself tighter. Adam, don't forget the reason your team is here. I frown at the look she throws the leader of the group, a silent exchange passing between them before her heels click over the floor as she leaves. Shaking away the strange moment, I decide where to begin briefing Unit Bravo. I stand behind my desk, pulling out the very thin file on the murder. When I glance up, I find the group have already settled themselves about the room. Their casualness together makes me feel very much like the newcomer, but I brush the feeling away and straighten myself. Our pathologist has begun working on the autopsy, I begin. The only one who really seems to be paying attention is Nate. But with this being the first murder in our town, the first murder you're aware of, Adam says suddenly from where he stands looking out of the window. I glance over at him, raising a brow. Excuse me? The police are not always needed for solving crimes, he repeats, not bothering to look at me as he speaks. Well, considering this is a crime the police are needed for, I shall work to solve it. I turn my attention back to the file. We did manage to find the victim's phone, which my colleague, Tina Pone, is currently working through. As for the murder itself, we already know about the murder, Adam says, twisting himself around to face me fully. I grit my teeth at the repeated interruptions. Still, I would like to go through all the facts before continuing, so as we're all on the same page. As I said, this is my first murder case. I would like to be prepared. He crosses his arms in response, his biceps stretching the sleeves of his t-shirt to the point I fear it will tear. We can handle this. This isn't our first murder. Detective. My title drips from his tongue like he's appeasing a 5-year-old. There have already been multiple kills related to this target. Then maybe you should go investigate those instead, I exclaim, flinging my hands into the air in annoyance. One of his blonde brows arches in response to my outburst. Farah, sitting in the chair beside my desk, barely hides her snigger of laughter. Adam stares at me, his eyes slightly narrowed, though apparently in inspection rather than anger. As I stare back at him, holding my ground, I feel an odd tension course through my limbs at our held gaze. At first I figure it's guilt from interrupting him, but when it makes my stomach flutter and knees slightly weak, I worry it's something else entirely. I clear my throat and quickly glance away. I'm not sure what that was, but the effect lingers for a moment. When I dare look back, I find he snaps his gaze away, a small frown creasing his brow. Can we just get on with the job now? Morgan asks, interrupting the silence. She fumbles in the pocket of her jeans before drawing out a gleaming silver lighter, then perching a long cigarette between her lips. I'm sorry, but you can't smoke in here, I say, giving a half smile in apology. She stares at me for a moment before flicking open the lighter. A small flame sparks to life, searing the end of the cigarette and making it glow red. She inhales deeply, holding my gaze, before puffing out a long stream of gray smoke. This is the team my mother is so proud of? I scoff at the thought. She can keep them. Adam's arms drop to his sides. Morgan's right. We should get on with the task at hand, rather than discussing details we already know. Actually, I begin, I think it would be good to make sure we all know the same facts. But my words aren't even heard as Adam begins barking out orders to his team members. His suggestions are to check out newcomers to town, search any unused locations around the borders, and interrogate, not interview, anybody who may have seen what happened. The group rise from their places like dogs eager to follow his command. Enough is enough! I step out from around my desk and plant my feet firmly on the floor. You cannot just barrel in here and crash about town in the hopes of finding a deranged murderer hiding out there somewhere. My voice is louder and more commanding than I expected, making even Douglas glance up from the front desk and tense. The tall, broad-shouldered leader turns slowly to face me, seeming once again more curious than angered. Following my lead is the only way we'll catch the killer. I cock a hip and place a hand on it. Well, obviously not, seeing as you haven't caught him yet. I notice Farrah grin in amusement behind Adam, but try to keep my focus trained on their leader. Adam's lips tighten only a fraction of an amount, but I know I've finally pressed his buttons as much as he's pressed mine. A heavy silence reigns over the office once again, and I'm thankful when Nate steps into the center of the room, like some kind of referee during a boxing match. We're a large group, he says, resting a hand on Adam's shoulder as though bringing him out of his silent thoughts. Certainly large enough to split our resources. He looks at me, smiling and giving a nod of encouragement. What do you suggest we do, Detective? The hostility in the team leader's posture settles, reminding me of a bird calming ruffled feathers, and he spins away from me. I let out a subtle, calming breath and lean back against my desk, thinking over my options. I would suggest talking to our pathologist, Verda, to see if he's found anything further after the full autopsy, I say, sitting back on my desk. Then I will go with you, Nate offers, and the rest can go with Adam, too. Farrah steps forward between us. I think it was crash about town, she says, repeating my words from earlier and gaining a stern glare from Nate. I run a hand over my hair. That sounds like a good idea. We can all meet back here in a few hours? Both Nate and I turn to look at Adam, who remains silent for a moment before giving a stiff nod. A few hours, then, he says, and that is that. He strides out of my office, followed closely behind by Morgan and Farrah, looking like some strange type of entourage. Well, that meeting probably could have gone better, I mutter quietly. I jump in surprise when it seems Nate heard what I mumbled. He chuckles softly, half smiling at me. It went better than most meetings Adam has. I return the smile, all the intensity of the moments before draining away with Nate's much calmer presence. I'm sorry about Adam, he continues. We don't often work with others, and I don't think he's too worried about improving his social etiquette when we do. I wasn't exactly very professional in the way I acted either, I admit, glancing at the floor. I'd say you did fairly well, considering his attitude. He shifts a step closer. I sometimes forget the impression he can make on those who don't know him. I just hope your impression of our team, your mother's team, isn't badly affected by Adam's terrible social skills. He gives a cheerful laugh. I find myself holding his gaze, unaware I'm really doing so. The bright calmness in his eyes draws me in, and it's a few moments more before I snap my focus away, a slight heat settling on my cheeks. So, shall we head to your pathologist? Nate suggests. That sounds good. He's in the basement, I say, pushing myself off my desk and heading to the door. The basement? It's where our pathology lab is, I explain, pausing in the doorway. Well, it's not much of a lab, to be honest, but Wayhaven's never really had need of it before. And I hope it will never have need of it again after this, he replies, honesty lacing his every word. As he reaches the doorway, I glance up at him, craning my neck all the way to meet his eyes. You seem a lot different to the others in your team. He gives a chuckle, a deep sound that reverberates from his chest and seems to vibrate through the air and land on my skin. I'm more like them than I would care to admit. His voice wavers, and I frown as I'm sure I hear a tone of regret in his words. Down in the lab. As always, the chill air instantly hits me as we walk towards the doors of the lab. Nate seems to feel it even more than I do, shivering and rubbing his hands over his arms to try and warm up a little. I give a quick knock on the door before swinging it open and heading inside. We find Verda peering over a selection of papers spread over his desk, the victim hidden beneath the white sheet on the table behind him. He glances up, his focus instantly shifting to Nate, who is quite obviously shortening his steps to keep in stride with me, and not steam on ahead with his long legs. Dr. Solomon Verda, this is Agent Nathaniel Sewell. I introduce them. Verda rises from his seat to walk towards us. Nate stretches out a hand in greeting, which Verda instantly takes. Nice to meet you, Dr. Verda. Likewise, Verda replies, a smile flickering at the corner of his mouth as he shoots me a knowing look. His raised brow is shouting, This man is very attractive. I pointedly ignore the look. Nate and his team work for my mother. We're working together on the investigation. Apparently our killer has been busy killing lots of people in other places too. Then, Agent, maybe you can help me, Verda says, reaching for the cloth covering the body. Nate is fine, he replies, his nose wrinkling as though the formality offends him. Verda nods with a smile, then lifts the cloth from the side of the victim to reveal her arms. I shuffle a step back at the sight of the jagged, long wounds sliced down the forearms of the dead woman. Have wounds like these been inflicted on the other victims? Nate's brows shifted a sympathetic frown. Unfortunately, yes. Is that how she died? I ask. Verda shakes his head. No, she actually died of shock. Same cause of death as the other victims, Nate reveals. I glance down at the victim with a frown. So how does someone die of shock? There are many ways, Verda replies, dragging his stool closer. Nate and I wince at the noise as the metal legs of the stool screech over the tiled floor. He takes a seat. But if you want my opinion, it was due to an attempted blood transfusion. What? Nate's voice is so sharp it makes me flinch. His shoulders tense almost around his ears, and his jaw tightens so much I worry his teeth will chip. A blood transfusion, Verda repeats, seemingly unaffected by Nate's sudden change in demeanor. You think that's where the strange blood came from? I ask, remembering what Verda told me about the oddities within the victim's blood. Strange blood? Nate asks, his tension only tightening. I nod. Verda found something strange about the victim's blood, mainly that it didn't seem to be all hers. Some kind of parasitic mutation, right? It's a guess, Verda says with a shrug. From what I could determine, it was as though the blood had been altered, confusing even the basic tests I did. It was hard to tell if it was human or animal, but the cells definitely seem human, just changed. I frown, asking the question which seems to hang in the air. But why would they want to do that? That's for you to answer, Detective. I can only give you the facts of what I find, Verda says, covering the woman's arms with the sheet again. Unfortunately, all the facts are not at my disposal until the hospital gets back to me. When will that be? Nate asks, his shoulders relaxing a little. I glance at Verda. A while. Verda stands from his place and moves back to his desk. The hospital doesn't exactly like the fact it has to help our department, so they can take a while. I heard they recently got a new blood technician, so I imagine things will take even longer. Nate spreads his hands out. Don't they want to help you catch the killer? You would think so, wouldn't you? I scoff in reply, shaking my head slightly. The speed with which we catch the killer benefits them. Surely they can see that, Nate says, more to himself than anything. And don't they want to help give her some peace? His soft gaze flickers down to the dead woman. I'll wait to hear from you, I say to Verda as I shift around to leave. Nate stares at the victim for a moment longer before ripping his focus away to follow me out. Oh wait, detective, Verda calls, making me pause and spin around. I almost forgot. He shuffles to his desk, grabbing up a small wad of printed paper. It's about the blood you collected at the warehouse. Nate takes a wide step forward, the tension from earlier quickly returning and making his whole body stiff. Blood? Yeah, I reply. I had a run-in with some strangers up at a potential murder site. One of them was injured, so I managed to collect a blood sample. I frown at Nate's reaction. The color drains from his face and he swallows hard. Are you all right, Agent? He shakes his head in an attempt to smile at me, but I can see it's masking his worry. I'm fine. What about the blood, Doctor? Verda shakes his head but smiles. Well, it's quite remarkable, but it seems to be similar. Near on the same, in fact, to the strange blood in the victim. My eyes widen. What? I don't know who this sample is from, Detective, but whoever they are should be either very ill or very dead. He frowns down at his papers. Or undead. Well, great, I say with a groan, rubbing a hand over my face. Now I have zombies strolling about town. Nate splutters, coughing, and I can't help but notice he seems to be trying to cover an amused smile with his hand. I brush off the odd reaction, too confused by all of this to think on it further. At least it's something to maybe follow up, Verda suggests. I give a nod. Any amusement in Nate drains quickly away. Are you certain this is something you should be investigating further? He asks. I'm sure it's all just coincidence. It's better than no lead at all, which is what I had before, I reply. Nate glances away. Yes, of course, you're right. I shake my head at his less than enthusiastic reply and turn back to Verda. Thank you. Let me know when you get anything else. Will do, the doctor replies, moving back to his desk. Nate and I then finally take our leave, heading out of the lab and back up into the main station. Back in the office. Back in my office, Nate is kind enough to make us some drinks while we wait for the rest of his team to return. Sorry about the lack of coffee, I say, as he grasps a steaming mug of tea in front of himself instead. He gives a genuine smile, taking the seat opposite my desk. No worries, I prefer tea anyway. With my attempt at small talk over, our conversation returns to the case. Maybe it would be a good idea to investigate the Ferris warehouse again, I say, voicing my thoughts aloud. I'm not exactly overly keen to return there after what happened before, but at least I could be more prepared this time. Nate leans forward in his chair, resting his forearms on his thighs. If you'd like, I can go with the rest of my team later. Are you sure? I ask, leaning forwards a little. I don't want to pawn my responsibilities off onto you. He shakes his head at my concern. Please, don't fret over it. It would be a good opportunity to acquaint ourselves with the area. He pauses. And also speak with my team about how to work with others. I give a resigned sigh. All right. The niggles of anxiety that knot my stomach settle somewhat. Might as well take advantage of having the extra people around for tasks like this. Are you certain you don't mind? He asks, concern in his tone, his dark brown eyes settling on mine. You did make your objection quite clear earlier about us going about town on our own. Yeah, it's fine. Working with a team wasn't exactly what I wanted for my first case, but seeing as we have to, hopefully he really will manage to talk some sense into his team. Then we can all get on with the case. At least you asked rather than demanded, I say. I only object to overbearing, egotistical... Oh, Adam! Hello! My voice cracks, and I almost spill my drink down my front in my haste to cut off my insult. Nate looks over his shoulder to the doorway where the rest of the team are entering. Any luck out and about? It yielded little, Adam replies, and I shift in my seat as his gaze flickers my way. Well, the detective and I have been speaking, and she suggested we check out one of the warehouses on the edge of town. Nate stands from his chair, moving closer to the group. She had an incident there with some possible suspects. Adam's gaze shoots to Nate so fast I'm surprised he doesn't topple over. And she agreed. I roll my eyes, sinking further into my chair and keeping my comments to myself, even more so when I see Farrah grinning in the corner. Come on, Nate says, his tone light. We better get going before the sun sets. He glances back at me, giving an appreciative nod. See you tomorrow, Detective. It was good working with you today. He offers me a smile along with his nod, and his expression makes my stomach flutter, and I have to clear my throat to stifle the excited feeling. Yeah, see you tomorrow. He pauses for a moment, our gazes catching, his expression only brightening. It's not until Adam gestures for the group of them to go that Nate glances away to join the others, who all head out of my office at the same time. I watch them leave the station. The exact moment they do, Tina pops her head around my door. What was that? She asks, her eyes shimmering. I shift a couple of papers on my desk. Nothing. She shuffles into the room, her curls bouncing around her face as she comes to perch herself on the edge of my desk beside me. I'm sorry, but 4 people who look like that in your office is not nothing. Well, unfortunately, their looks don't match their personalities, I reply, glancing up at her. I don't really need 'em to talk, she says, a sly smile tugging at her lips as she slides down into the chair beside my desk. Just stand around and brighten up the look of the place. Tina, I reprimand, though I can't help but chuckle. You can't blame me for thinking it. She spreads her hands out wide in front of her. I mean, did you see them? Yes, I saw them, I reply, still chuckling. At least that's a start, I suppose, she says, pouting her lips. When was the last time you even thought about spending some time on your love life? It's just so much effort to do the dating scene, I say, slumping back in my chair, especially with the lack of options in this town. But if you wanted, your options just became a little wider. She stands from her place, smiling so genuinely it makes her eyes crinkle. You're a detective now, Celeste. You've reached pretty high in your career. You're allowed to enjoy the rest of your life too, you know. I purse my lips. Then I tap a few keys on the computer so that the monitor flashes to life, unsure how to respond to Tina. You're a strong, independent woman, she continues, and I flicker my gaze over the top of my screen to meet hers. You deserve a strong, independent person at your side. Another smile curves her lips. And it wouldn't hurt if they were easy on the eyes, right? I finally crack out a grin. All right, I get your point, but this murder takes priority right now. Oh, that reminds me, she says, pausing on her way out. I came in here to tell you I found out who the victim was. A heaviness hits me like a brick to the chest. Who was she? Janet Greenland, Tina says, her brows shifting into sympathy. Poor girl. She was an engineer. She was here looking for a place to rent, trying to get away from the crime of the big city. Kind of ironic, isn't it? She turns and leaves, a somber air having fallen over my office at the news. I turn my focus back to my computer, hoping I might be able to figure out what to do next. Later that night, near the center of town. You weren't a handsome man, were you, Dr. Murphy? The new Dr. Ethan Murphy says, glancing down at the photo ID badge now pinned to his jacket. Replacing the photo with his own would have to be done soon, but that could wait until tomorrow. Feeding had to be his focus now. Murphy darts through the shadowed streets, frowning when the buzz of the lampposts makes his head ache. He does much better in moonlight only, so he heads towards one of the darker areas between the flat, boring buildings. There has to be someone around, even in this backwater hole of a town, he mutters. He scans the back doors of the apartment buildings. They line the walls like fridge doors down the aisle of a supermarket. The scent of humans inside seeps through the bricks, searing his nose, and he muffles his hungry groans with his hand. He hasn't fed in weeks, which was a mistake. His last failed experiment had to be due in part to his hunger. Eating straight from the source is not his preferred method of fulfilling his needs, but he has little choice due to being run out of his accommodations by that stupid pack of agents. Murphy's lip curls in disgust. Just the thought of them makes his skin itch. The agency is useless. A bunch of power-hungry humans and their supernatural pets. Murphy spits onto the street, the thought of them leaving a vile taste in his mouth. Having to live in the shadows rather than taking their place at the top in this world, and all because of fear of the agency's wrath. It is beginning to wear thin on many of his kind. Killing the unit that had resided in Wayhaven had helped to dispel some of his pent-up rage. It had also been somewhat of a perk when he'd overheard them speaking about another potential victim in this town. Of course, they hadn't revealed anything further upon him asking. Torture isn't his forte, even if death is. Still, learning there's another potential vessel out there had given him hope once more when he had feared his last attempt was the final one. Wayhaven isn't that big. He'll find this new one eventually. And once he has them, oh, crushing the agency will be like crushing ants beneath his boot. A smile tugs at his pale lips, his steps speeding with renewed intent. The time of the agency and their coddled supernaturals will be at an end soon enough. But for now, feeding has to be his priority. That fact is made obvious by the stinging of his dry throat and the pain which laces throughout his blood. It really has been too long since he's fed. Yet, even in a careful town like this one, lost lambs continue to stray from their flock. Murphy draws to a stop at the exit of an alleyway. Lamplight pools down onto the pavement below, highlighting a slim figure bundled up and marching so fast through the opposite alleyway they're almost sprinting. Probably afraid of what lurks in the shadows. Murphy chuckles at the thought. In a flash of movement, he steps out in front of the walker. The youthful face of the young boy stares back at him wide-eyed. Where did you come from? He stammers. Shh, Murphy coos, taking the boy's hand in both of his and staring into his eyes with unwavering intensity. Why don't you relax? For a few seconds, the boy struggles to yank his hand back, but the resistance finally melts. The boy's cornflower blue eyes mist over, and an absent-minded smile lands on his lips. Murphy grins wide, one arm seizing the boy's waist and yanking him closer. His free hand tips the youth's head to one side. The boy's satchel drops from his shoulder, collapsing onto the ground and spilling out a variety of colorful school textbooks. He didn't need to make quite that much of a mess of the boy, but then, it's always fun to leave such a discovery for those persistently intrusive agents.